Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. On behalf of SAPIA, the Solar PV Industry Association, and SOWIA, the Wind Energy Association, I would like to welcome you to our Women's Month webinar entitled The Vision for Women in the South African Renewable Sector. For those of you who don't know me, I am Nivesh Govender, the Chief Operating Officer of the South African Photovoltaic Industry Association, or SAPIA, and your Program Director for this webinar. It is said that a woman is an epitome of beauty, wisdom, and care. She has climbed the mountains and dived into the oceans. She has matched the steps with every man in the world. Women's Month celebrates the power of women, their rights and role in our lives and society. It is that time to honor the power of a woman, but also highlight their suffrage, pain, and anguishes as they have successfully battled over the years. Today, ladies and gentlemen, is a difficult session for all of us. And it would be remiss of us not to take the opportunity to remember and honor our friend and colleague, the late Ms. Ntombifuthi Ntuli, the CEO of SOWIA. To do this, we have with us Ms. Marcia Grimbeck, the SOWIA chairperson, who will do the official welcome to today's session and pay tribute to Ntombi. Over to you, Marcia.
Thank you, Nivesh, and a warm welcome to everyone this afternoon. I'm going to echo what you said, Nivesh. You know, you just said something that struck with me. Not only is a woman there who matches every step that a man takes, but Ntombifuthi was the kind of woman who not only matched a step, but she led. And she led quietly and confidently. And it is an honor to say a few words to celebrate Women's Month, but also to celebrate the life of an incredibly wonderful woman. And today is our chance to once again say thank you to Ntombifuthi for the way she brightened our lives, for the way she led the industry, and for the footprint that she has left in our hearts in this half-life she was granted. We will always be grateful that she was a part of our lives. And I think that as we celebrate Women's Month, it is only fair that we pay tribute to the wonderful person that she was, to the power that she wielded as an individual, to see the potential not only in others, but to show the potential in yourself through her life. She continually encouraged opportunities for women to enter the wind sector, and she celebrated, along with every one of us, every milestone of every woman in this industry. I want to quote again from the memorial service that we had for Ntombifuthi. What is success? In the words of Ralph Waldo Emerson, success is to laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty and to find the best in others, to leave the world a little bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition, to know even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. This is to have succeeded. And that quotation will forever remind me of Ntombifuthi Ntuli. She succeeded not only as a woman, she succeeded as a colleague, as a friend, as a mother. And no words that I can say in this short space of time bear enough tribute to the individual that she was. And I only ask that each of us, as we attend this webinar and as we go forward, men and women alike, that we honor her legacy and continue the work that she started and believed in so passionately. Farewell, Ntombi. Rest well. Thank you, Nivesh.
Thank you, Marcia, for those inspired words. Your tribute has given us a lot to think about and reflect on, both in our personal capacities and our professional lives. This Gender Diversity Working Group was an initiative conceptualized and implemented by Ntombi. So in many ways, this is very much part of her legacy as well. An IRENA study in 2019 reports that strengthening women's role in renewable energy is key to achieving multiple sustainable development goals. The study indicates that women represent only 32% of full-time employees in the renewable energy sector globally. The study further identifies barriers preventing women from entering jobs in the renewable energy sector, including cultural and social norms, unequal asset ownership, lack of skills, and lack of gender-specific training. While the Minister of Energy, Minister Gwede Mantashe, officially launches the energy sector women empowerment and gender equality strategy with an associated advisory council, our esteemed panel on this webinar of professionals in the renewable energy sector will be sharing their real-life experiences and covering these various aspects. Today's webinar is proudly brought to you by the Wind and Solar PV Industry Associations. As the representative voice of wind and solar PV, SOWIA and SAPVIA are constantly working towards collaborating with stakeholders across the sector to share knowledge and drive effective change. With that in mind, I would like to invite the leadership of the Gender Diversity Working Group to provide context and insight into the structure and operations of this particular working group. With that, over to you, Laura and Meliswa, who are the chairperson and vice chairperson of this working group.
Thanks very much, Navishan. So this Gender Diversity Working Group was launched in March this year and had 8 goals ahead of it for the year. Quite meaty goals, certainly ones that were challenging to all of us. We had fantastic turnout of people who came and said, we will lend our energy. And we had a number of those people who have signed up to lead the subgroups and add their voice, add their intelligence, add their thinking to progress the goals of the Gender Diversity Working Group. We have had some challenges in the year. Of course, life gets in the way. But we're very pleased that we've made some good progress in some of those goals. And Melissa and I will just take you through them at a high level now. The first one, and this is one I know that Ntombi was very passionate about, is the development of a formal women's leadership development program tailored for women in the renewable energy. Now, this is something that we're hoping to launch next year. The progress that Ntombi made in this was she has got some quotes and some feedback around how this course could be developed for women. She'd started speaking to industry leaders about how to fund this program. And so this is one that we're going to be going back to our network and saying, how can we take this one forward so that we can offer this to women in the industry from 2022 and going forward. We're going to be hearing a little bit later the wonderful work that Kalnisha and Karen and Paula have done in the We Connect mentoring program that's been running for women. It's been running for about 5 or 6 months now. And you'll hear Navishan, I know, is one of the mentors on the program. So some of the people on the panel here, and they've been really doing making some wonderful progress, and we're looking forward to hearing some feedback on that. I'll pass over to Melissa for the final 2. Melissa?
Thanks, Laura, and good afternoon to everyone. Okay, the last 2 goals that we're working on for this year, that is 2021, is the dialogue and events. And this goal specifically looks at the opportunities for people in the gender diversity working group and others to discuss and learn from the specific topics of interest. This is one of the outputs of this specific goal, this webinar that we are on today. And then there is another work done already that is now in preparation for other activities that will be ongoing as of the first quarter of 2022. But as Laura has indicated, we're only sharing the ones that we are driving for this year, or rather executing for this year. Then the last one that we are working on is the recognition awards that needs to be included on the Wind Indaba for this year. And this is mainly to develop recognition awards relevant to gender diversity, that is celebrating women at the Wind Indaba Gala dinner. So we will be sharing this one as well on the upcoming Wind Indaba. Hopefully COVID is not gonna rob us of that opportunity. So yes, I think in a nutshell, those are the goals that we are executing for 2021. Thank you.
And then just to wrap up before I pass on, I'll be speaking towards the end of today's session on one further goal that will be executed in 2022, which is the charter for the renewable energy industry and associated goals that we'll be having with that. Thank you. Back to you, Nivesh.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Melissa. I think that has set the scene for today's conversation. Sarah Strawmeyer said it best: "The power of women united, I am again reminded, is an invincible thing." The panel discussion will be focused on the different roles of women and organizations in the renewable sector. It will also discuss ways around how the workplace can continue to strive to be inclusive of women in the sector. The discussion looks at current policy and leadership experience and will end with suggesting ways in which different interventions and commitments can be included in the industry's Gender Diversity Charter. With that, let me introduce you to our amazing panel today. First up is Ms. Vuyo Matiwani. She is the grid manager at BTE Renewables. Vuyo manages the grid integration of projects from development to financial close. During construction and operations, she joined the renewable energy industry straight from university in 2013, working for Eskom. She has been involved in the integration of renewable energy projects under the REAP program since window 1. Vuyo is the renewable power plant representative for SAPIA and SOWIA at the South African Grid Code Advisory Committee, which deals with the South African Grid Code. We then have Ms. Thokozile Zambane, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Infrastructure Partners. Thokozile comes from the banking and finance team at Norton Rose Fulbright, and also has extensive experience working for global multinationals, having worked for the Citibank Global Markets team in London and E.ON, a German utility. Thokozile regularly facilitates training for development finance institutions across the continent in the structuring and financing of large-scale clean energy projects with the Association of African Development Finance Institutions, as well as legal masterclasses for SMMEs. She is a Power Africa Yali Women in Africa Power Program alumni and Mandela Washington Fellow. She is currently the COO of Bayaka Infrastructure Partners, a licensed infrastructure fund manager, where she's responsible for leading the firm's operational strategy and supports fundraising and investment activities. Thokozile is passionate about developing communities and using clean energy as a tool to drive socio-economic development, and is an independent trustee of the Chaba Wind for Change Community Trust, a shareholder in the Chaba Wind Farm, an IPP under the South Africa's REAP program. Thokozile is also the co-founder of Read Power, a social investment initiative that donates solar lights to households in informal settlements, enabling children to study at night with adequate lighting, an initiative that also empowers unemployed youth in communities with skills to install these units. Our third panelist is Mr. Maloba Cheshla, who is the Head of Strategy and Growth at ED Platform. He will be providing the male perspective. Maloba is a loudly proud Mosotho and the Head of Strategy and Growth at ED Platform. He is responsible for managing inter-team collaborations to improve the business value offerings and efficiency, as well as driving strategy to ensure successful growth in current and new markets. Maloba is also charged with fostering innovation across the company's units, as well as ensuring optimal team performance. Maloba has experience in green economy policy, renewable energy, both utility scale and embedded generation, clean technology innovation, and entrepreneurship. Prior to joining the ED platform, Maloba was responsible for driving the technical aspects of incubation support to clean tech entrepreneurs at the Innovation Hub. Additionally, giving technical support to Gauteng Province Government Clean Energy Initiative. Maloba is a chemical engineer by training and also holds a master's degree in sustainable development focused in renewable energy. Maloba is keenly interested in what sustainable development truly looks like on the African continent. Our next panelist is Ms. Sue van Hershfeld, an industrial and organizational psychologist and founder of Positive Change International. Sue has solid experience in creating learning and change in diverse cultures and organizations. Her sound business and organizational knowledge is based on over 40 years of hands-on experience in creating businesses, managing people, and projects. Sue regularly facilitates and lectures in people management and development topics for UCT's Graduate School of Business and is a co-convener and designer of their Developing Women in Leadership program. After a 12-year stretch in the corporate world, Sue has been in the learning and development consultancy business since 1989 with both national and international clients. Sue has spoken at conferences and published in practitioners' journals in the UK, South Africa, and Australia. She has an MA in Industrial and Organizational Psychology from the University of Cape Town. Our last panelist joining this panel is Ms. Valerie Gien, the National Coordinator at UNIDO, focused on the global program on the economic empowerment of women in green industry. The role has included policy research, capacity building, and a program of action prioritizing gender equality in the sector's renewable energy, waste management, and road transportation. Valerie's rich experience in leading collaborative and innovative initiatives, particularly between government and private sector, has included strategic and practical responses to climate change, industrial energy efficiency, and the green economy. She has also played an advisory role for UNIDO's program on global clean tech, low carbon transport, and gender mainstreaming. A bold and enduring passion for making a difference in her primary areas of work has earned her the recognition of the Mail and Guardian as a climate change leader, as well as an award for the Department of Energy's Women in Energy Efficiency Award 2017. She is currently completing a Master's in Management of Energy Leadership in Wits Business School. With those introductions, let me hand over to Ms. Letlogonolo Soy, who is the Technical Program Officer at SOWIA, to facilitate this panel discussion. Over to you, Shloki.
Thank you, Nivesh. Good afternoon to everyone who has joined us on this webinar today. In the opening statement of our Gender Diversity Working Group, we looked at the research that has been published by RENA, which looks at the representation of women in the global wind energy workforce and the renewables market. And what we found was that there's only 8% of women in senior leadership. And so we created this platform for us to keep the conversation going and also look around ways in which we can mitigate or improve the statistics in our local market. And so, Valerie, I start with you. With the work that UNIDO has done recently in developing a report for women in the green economy, what are some of the policy recommendations for gender diversity that have come up for the renewable sector? May you please share some of those recommendations and what other commitments have been made, or what are the important takeaways that the renewable sector can implement in the short, medium, and long term? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Shloki. I hope you don't mind me calling you Shloki because I think
Not
my
at all.
tongue is going to get tired otherwise. And yes, good afternoon to all my fellow speakers and to our participants. And I really appreciate an opportunity to share our reports specific to the renewable energy industry And I'm sorry about those people that are sitting in the other meeting, and hopefully we can pass the message on. But I am going to refer to that meeting because I think it's also important as we take this discussion forward. So I think before I talk specific to the renewable energy industry, I just want to say that the overarching intention of doing the research and starting this particular program was to see the increase of women in leadership positions as well as entrepreneurs in the green industry space. And if you've had a look at our report, you'll see that we particularly focused on renewable energy with wind and solar in mind, with waste energy, with waste, as well as road transport. And of course, we haven't done in-depth analysis of each of those sectors, but we interviewed people. So unfortunately, and my condolences to Ntombi Futhi, because she was one of the people I called upon to feed into an understanding of the renewable sector when we did our initial research early last year. And I must say she was a very willing participant. And I know that even in my engagements with her, one of her ideas of starting this forum, I think, was linked to the work. I'm not saying that we started, but I'm just saying it probably nudged her thinking in going forward. So as I said, our target was to reach and contribute to women's participation in all the sectors that I've mentioned. But the pathway to doing that was to undertake research to give us some information. And that research was a mixed method formal research with key interviewees, including Ntombi Futhi, for example, other senior government officials as from different and relevant departments, as well as focus group discussions with professional women already in the green industry space, and a feminist critical policy review, which I'm going to probably spend a bit more time speaking about. Now, the findings so let me start exactly with that. I think the feminist critical review is the one that's most pertinent to informing what I'd like to share with you this afternoon. What we did is we chose 10 different policies, and we call them policies, but some of them sat in the legislative space, some of them were in the strategy space, and some of them were in the action plan space. In the case of the Department of Minerals and Energy, for example, we looked at their strategy. And those of you who might know about that strategy, it was published or made public in 2017. But of course, we have taken track of other responses that we got from them as well. And out of the 10, and I'm just going to say broadly what some of those other policies were. They included what would have been called IPAP previously, but now the reimagining the future industry of the Departments of Trade and Industry. They included the climate change policy, they included the green transport strategy, and so on. Out of those strategies and policies, we found that in terms of our criteria, and if you look at the report, there's much more detail on what the questions were that we applied to make those assessments. From all the questions that we asked, we found that about 6 out of the 10 were not conforming to a gender mainstreaming. In other words, much as there's a whole lot of documents and commitments and pledges by the country to talk about gender mainstreaming broadly, when it came to looking at these particular policies, we found them unfortunately quite gender blind in many respects. And, but I will, on the other hand, say that in terms of the Department of Minerals and Energy, they were one of the few who at least scored higher points than the others, simply because they had a strategy, there was activity happening, there was a database of women that they continuously engage with and try to make aware of opportunities in the space of energy, whether it's renewable or any other form of energy. And there was a lot more happening there than we found in other areas. Nevertheless, we still made recommendations, specific recommendations to them. And bear in mind, I think that this is going to be a moving target because as we speak, there's a strategy, a new strategy being launched. And so, you know, one of my questions that you asked me to address was what's one of our short-term goals that we should set for ourselves. And for me, I think I'd start by saying one of the short-term goals should be to look at the strategy as it comes out if we haven't seen it, and assess it or look at it and see where the gaps are if we're talking about gender mainstreaming. And again, if you go to the criteria that I've mentioned that's contained in our report, ask yourself all those questions. Is the strategy gender responsive? Is the word woman mentioned anywhere in the strategy? Is empowerment mentioned? By the time you get to the conclusion of the strategy, does it tell you what the targets are, what the indicators are for measurement? Where exactly in the renewable energy space or value chain is this strategy going to look at? And also ask yourself whether you get the sense that gender is spoken about across the units within the government department, not just in the gender office, but whether it's in the IPP office or any other parts of the mechanisms or the infrastructure of the energy department. Our recommendations then specifically looking at the strategy and information that was available to us and that was shared with us through our interview process, and up to the point of April 2020. Our recommendations contained in the report were saying, move beyond the business case for why women should be involved and actually tackle the whole issue of empowerment. Don't just say women should be there because it's good for them, they'll add value, That's important, but let's also talk about what are the specific goals you want to reach and targets you want to reach. We also suggested a greater focus on intersectionality. And in our definition of intersectionality, we felt that we wanted the renewable energy sector to represent the face of South Africa. So whether you were talking about race, whether you were talking about different strata of our society, so from rural to suburban women across different language groups, ethnicities, and so on. That's what we meant by intersectionality, really going across the board. And I think in South Africa, I'm sure you would agree that we really need to see a lot more Black and particularly Black African women represented in the space when we're talking about gender mainstreaming. We also suggested, because in our research, we found it hard to see annual reports on how DMRE was progressing against that 2017 strategy. So our hope then would be that in this strategy that's being launched this afternoon, and in fact, that's part of the discussions we've been having with all the government departments we've been engaging with, that they will look at a midterm review or continuous monitoring and review of the strategy, that the action plan must be actionable. It must have some form of indicators to measure progress. It must set targets and so on. But it must also show us whether we're making progress somewhere midstream. So we don't go too far and then find we haven't actually moved far enough. And so this is not just for energy, by the way, for all the departments or government stakeholders that we engage with in that form part of the green industry focus. We have said, look at measurement and verification and evaluation at the end, but do it also in a continuous way. So the need for indicators, and I need to maybe also just punctuate what I'm saying by saying that as you, as my colleagues on this platform who are part of the gender diversity group, think of your own strategies from a private sector perspective. See to what extent you can actually mirror the very things we're saying to government. So if you're setting up your own targets, how are you monitoring? What are your indicators? How are you measuring it? And so on. And I think that's probably, maybe another important thing, which was cross-cutting for all the departments, was finding out that people didn't all understand what we meant by gender mainstreaming. People don't all understand what we mean by gender equality. Men think we mean leave them out. So quite often men are not in the room. But when we're talking about gender equality, we really are saying lets us be as equal as possible between men and women. So men should be in the room. Because if we are saying in this discussion that we need more jobs, more leadership, and more ownership to go to women, and if that means that some man is going to have to give up that opportunity, he needs to be in the room to know that. Or if we need a man to create the opportunity and the space for you to claim that space, he needs to be in the room to be part of that discussion. A very important finding of the report was that women don't know where the opportunities are. Well, part of what they also said was that men have these clubs in which they discuss those opportunities and they exclude from those clubs. So we network amongst ourselves as women, but we actually miss the big deals where the real discussion happens in those other networks. And so the need for men and women to be in the same place is really important. But then coming to, so those in summary were the recommendations, the ones that I've just whizzed through. When it comes to short, medium, and long-term goals that come from the report, but I think they also come from my own knowledge and engagement with the industry. I've come a long way working with very male-dominated environments in the energy efficiency space. And I think energy efficiency is one thing, renewables another, but there's a linkage between the two. And quite often, it's been the same people who worked in that energy efficiency space that I worked with, who've now moved over into the renewable energy space and sometimes taken the same kind of perspective with them into that space. So it really does, so as much as we think renewable energy is new, and we therefore have new thoughts and new people and new views on things, there is a bit of legacy that's come with us, in the sense that sometimes the same people may have come and not necessarily transition into a new way of thinking. And this is something to be conscious of. So with regard to the short term, can I just quickly buzz through the last?
I'll give you 1 minute.
Okay. On the short term, I would say that what you've already highlighted, please keep that because I think that's really important. But from what I'd like to add to the short-term goals is to please also take cognizance of the master plan, the Renewable Energy Master Plan, because we have DTI in the room with us. They haven't finalized it, and what they've all agreed to is that they will now re-look at, before they finalize the master plan, look at to what extent it is gender mainstreamed. In terms of medium, you talked about charters and champions. I'd say in the medium term, please do go forward with that. And in the long term, I'd just like to say, please take a look at the Sustainable Development Goals and see to what extent you try to get your work to marry the timelines of the sustainability goals, the Paris Agreement, the national climate change targets, and so on. And whatever the IRP also contains, as well as what your industry forecasts are. And I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Valerie. I think you've given us a lot that we can actually keep unpacking throughout this discussion. The next question is for Sue. I think Valerie raised such important questions on really being able to measure where we start and where we're going and the in-between all of that. So Sue, what opportunities are there in incorporating some of these recommendations that came out of the UNIDO study into organizations and government level, and how does it help in maintaining the need to engage on gender diversity matters? You're on mute.
Sorry, the clarion call of Zoom meetings. You're on mute. So yeah, thanks. I actually I work in the belly of the beast. The beast being the actual workplace, you know, hearts and minds of men and women who are working across different industries. I don't only work in the renewables. I consult and work, do programs in lots of industries. And so I just really wanted to make a couple of points about what I see happening, sort of not from a policy point of view, but actual what's actually happening and what's going on in people's hearts and minds. So I literally have, I think it's 4 very short slides, mostly with pictures. If you wouldn't mind showing those, that would be great. Maybe put it on full screen so we don't look at all of them. on slideshow, yeah. So this is something that the first one, I mean, we know this, that's sort of why we're here, why you're here. But I think what it really, really illustrates is actually the drop off of percentage-wise of men and women. And this is South Africa to 2015, you know, have things changed, maybe a little bit, not dramatically, but that in fact, even if you go further back than this, in 2017, 63% of university graduates in this country were women. So if you take this pipeline even further to the left, it's actually an even greater percentage of women entering, potentially entering the workplace. So the question is, you know, obviously what's sort of happening. If we can have the next slide quickly, please. And, you know, there are a number of ways of conceptualizing this. You know, one way of looking at it is what's the kind of thing that happens, or what are some of the dynamics that happen after women graduates enter the workplace, and what prevents them from evening out that division, if you like, in the two halves of that pipeline. And here's, you know, if, on the one hand, new employees, actually men and women tend to begin their careers with equal aspirations and confidence with respect to their ability and their willingness and their enthusiasm to be part of top management. So there's not a big difference. In fact, there's actually a higher, women generally have higher aspirations, apparently. As they go through their corporate experience, and here you can see, you know, that's the sort of data from that pipeline, but expressed a little bit differently, both aspiration and confidence actually starts diminishing. So there's something that's happening in workplaces that is actually lowering women's confidence and lowering their expectations. And so what is that? That's a big question, obviously. I'd just like to bring two things out, and there's a huge amount of research and body of knowledge and practice around this, but just two things just to contribute into this discussion, and we can maybe talk about some of the practical implications of that in subsequent questions. If I could have the next slide, please. There's something called the imposter phenomenon. It used to be called the Imposter Syndrome, which was a bit unfortunate because it sounds like a disease and it isn't. And it doesn't only apply to women. In fact, it applies quite a lot to people who are first generation university educated, for example. But a lot of the women I work with actually, when they hear about this concept, they say that is actually exactly my experience. And that sense of being a fraud, that sense of not really deserving the position, that sense of I'm one mistake away from losing everything. I'm about to be found out. So there's something that's happening that's actually decreasing women's confidence. And the further up in the more objective success that women have, the more this feeling actually predominates. And it's almost like, you know, being closer and closer to the edge. And it's an incredibly debilitating thing. There's a statistic that's thrown around, I don't know whether it's true, you know, that says men apply for jobs when they feel they % of the requirements. Women apply for jobs when they feel they meet 120% of the requirements. That's a hell of a claim. I don't know whether there's any rigorous research behind that, but it gives you that sense of you know, what it's like to actually to not have self-belief and to actually always feel fearful. Can I have the next slide, please? I think this is possibly the last one, having to do with second generation gender bias. And I think this is absolutely crucial to understanding what is happening, what is happening in terms of women's development in any kind of organization, your own industry included. This has got nothing to do with something that our mothers or grandmothers experience. It's not second generation in that sense. It's second generation in as much as it's invisible. So it's below the waterline, if you like. It's the kind of thing where many organizations, and this is important from a policy point of view, because this, irrespective of what the policies are, and Valerie gave us a, you know, really nice context around that, those things policies tend to deal with things that are above the water. They tend to deal with, you know, let's get our policies right. Let's make sure that we've got good sexual harassment policies in place. Let's make sure that we've got targets, we've got numbers. We actually are making sure that that we are bringing women-friendly policies into the workplace. So it's all those kinds of things. They're visual, they're explicit, and very often violating them is actually illegal. But just before I delve underneath the water, just very briefly to say, if we just go back to the numbers, I wanted to make another point that in fact, in a sense, no, just going, we can stay with the slide. I just wanted to make a point about the numbers. But in fact, there's something called title inflation. And I think there's also something that we see and experience, which is that even if women actually are in the numbers in the higher positions, it doesn't necessarily mean they have the requisite power and authority that you might associate with that. And this point about second generation gender bias often plays into that, or was a reason for that. In other words, I have the title manager, I have the title director, but actually I'm not accorded the authority, the decision-making authority that one might think that title takes or is accompanied with that title. So here are all sorts of things that we see in organizations. It's the more subtle things, microaggressions, the odd comment, the body language, it could be, yes, we're going to have a meeting at 7 o'clock and let's meet on the bicycle track because we all like cycling, don't we, kind of thing. The double bind around, how can I be a woman and be assertive at the same time? How is my behavior interpreted by people? Gender partition, this is an interesting one around people actually feeling or organizations almost separating out men and women, not from a policy or discrimination perspective, but from the point of view of actually saying that men, for example, are less inclined to network with women, less inclined to almost develop personal relationships because of fear that it might be interpreted as sexual harassment. So there's all sorts of dynamics and complexities sitting in that. This myth that actually we just put our heads down and do a good job and we'll get the jobs and we'll get the promotions, and so on and so forth. So really, that's really all that I wanted to say in terms of my own experience and the kind of dynamics that are sitting behind some of these numbers and the sorts of things that, yes, policies and so on are really important, goals are important, but actually really understanding what it feels like for women in organizations and what some of the realities are is equally important in terms of gaps. Thank you. I think that's all I wanted to say for this initial part.
Yeah, so our next question actually moves on to entrepreneurs, and that's you and Togo. And I think for me, if I look at the second slide that you shared, being an entrepreneur certainly means that your ambitions have not been diminished over the years that you've actually been in the workplace. So I'll start with Togo. How, Togo, have you been able to set yourself apart and create opportunities for others? And if you're looking at the theme around policies and being able to measure and implement them in organizations, what sort of policies do you have in the space that you work, in the space that you lead as well, in order to ensure and support gender diversity?
Thank you, Little Honolo. I would say I've been able to set myself apart in my entrepreneurial journey and professional journey. And I think what, a lot of the things that Sue touched on really, I felt very triggered, and that, oh yeah, that is really what happened. Even the stuff that Valerie was speaking about. And a lot of it had really, I needed to start, instead of focusing on the fact that I am not a man and I'm in an all-male room, I really started approaching each room that I entered into from a perspective of focusing what value could I bring into the room by walking in, So, in a room full of engineers, you don't necessarily need another engineer, and there's always room for another perspective. In a room full of funders and investors, you actually need somebody that has that heart, that even has that femininity and is really going to be driven about, yes, guys, I get the IRR that we're looking for, but what is the actual impact we're going to drive in those communities? When dealing with project developers who are anxious, it's an anxious experience. It's a very hard experience. You'll really you'll really see some bruises, but it's being able to walk into that room with a level of empathy, somebody that has gone through the journey, has taken the punches and able to kind of, hold somebody's hand. And I've really found that when we're no longer trying to be, trying to act like men or go that approach. And when we really then just settle into that femininity and into those strengths and that power, we're actually able to add a lot of value in the room, you know. And another thing that really has been able to set me apart has been, you know, I've been fortunate enough to have a very holistic experience of the energy sector and of project development. And in every new role I would take, obviously, you know, there's that imposter syndrome, like, oh my goodness, okay, we're at it again, you know. But what I've also realized in it, and I think, you know, confidence is built with competence, you know. So if you continue to work on your craft, if you continue to identify, okay, no, I'd like to understand a bit more on financial modeling, and you start playing with that, you'll finally, you know, get to that place where you are starting to build that confidence in the spaces that that you're really operating in. And, you know, and having been involved across the value chain, I've actually been able to see and, you know, and can say firsthand that having women involved across the value chain does actually make business sense. You know, I mean, there's things we will think about that, you know, pedantic detail that they'll say, oh, women, that has saved people, that has saved companies money, you know. So at the end of the day, you actually, you know, if you're going to go into war, if you're going to go into battle, you want to make sure that, you know, you've got your full arsenal and you've got that perspective. So, you know, so from my perspective, you know, when I joined now Bayaka Infrastructure Partners, and it was an all-male executive team, and you know, and I walked in, and it was almost like walking in, and I was like, okay, I'm ready to get to work. And for me, it was about, I wanted to create a space for women to thrive, not just survive. We are past the place of, oh, survive, oh, will it work? No, a space where, you know, as women, we can walk in and, you know, you're able to walk into that organization at whatever level you are at, that it is geared towards you thriving. The policies are drafted in a manner that takes you into account, because as a woman, I know what that lived experience is. And I know that sometimes you can't even raise your voice and ask for certain things because it's going to be perceived in a certain way. So we need to almost be reactive as women in those positions and draft the policy. Somebody shouldn't have to ask for certain things. We should already, you know, have them in place. And to the point of, when you are then in those rooms, you know, and you know, it's, you know, there's a trend where they'll say, okay, let's make a woman, let's put her in the executive team, and we'll have her quiet there in the corner. And I think this generation of women is saying, oh, no, I won't be, you know, in fact, you've allowed me into this room, let me get to work, you know. And one of the things that, you know, I've now, you know, pushed and driven for is that as a firm, we are actually going to be adopting the United Nations Women Empowerment Principles. And for me, you know, in terms of looking, because, you know, you've always got to be guided by the policies that are out there, or a framework. And for me, what I found in the WEPS is that it's really a great framework for companies that are serious. You know, if you're really serious about saying you want to drive gender parity, it's a really great framework for you to think around some of your policies, because, you know, to that point of, and as a woman, yes, I can think as a woman, but we also have to be cognizant that decision makers aren't necessarily going to be thinking in that way. But frameworks like WEPS actually, you know, is an opportunity to check your privilege. It's an opportunity to say, look, equal pay is quite important. Look, you know, it's not even just about what you're doing in terms of your organization, but it's a framework in terms of your supply chain. You know, it's not enough to say we need to have women ownership, but we need to actually be diversifying that supply chain. And that's only going to happen when we're intentional about it, when we're intentional about the fact that I'm not, as Thokozile, I don't play golf. I'm not going to find you at the golf course. So how are you actually going to, you know, make a way to get me into your supply chain? You're not going to, and it means introducing policies that says we don't select and we don't procure by what happened at the pub or what happened at the supply, you know, at the golf course. We procure from a perspective of the policy says this is it. And also, it's not even just saying a policy for procuring from women-owned businesses, set a target, you know, because, you know, also I think I'm done with corporate saying, oh, look at us, we bought from a woman-owned business. Oh, great. What about the rest of your 20 suppliers? You know, so set that clear target. And with that, I think, I'm mindful of time, otherwise I definitely can carry on.
Thanks, Togo. You've actually made me jump to a couple of questions just because of some of the points you've raised about bringing femininity into the role that you are in. And I think when I met Sue a few weeks ago, we actually spoke about this, about the difference in how women and men actually measure their achievements as engineers. And I shared with her that in the time that I was working in the field, for me, it was actually seeing a space where you're actually changing somebody's life, you know, through them being part of a project or something like that. And so I'll take this question to Vuyo. You're a manager in a very highly technical and important role as a grid manager. And for you, what are some of the achievements that you actually draw from that? In that, I mean, the wind energy sector is a major driver of our economy and our societies. And do you see that as something that is important to you? And I mean, what would you share with younger women who would be interested in becoming electrical engineers and taking on a similar role as you?
Thank you, Tlochi, and good afternoon, everyone. This is actually a question that is, in terms of the direction that is going, is much close to my heart because I'm amongst the many South Africans who grew up without electricity. So I kind of understand what it's like to be in a state of a project is not just about the technical side of things. It's about also making an impact and changing people's lives. So the projects that we do, they bring that aspect in terms of the femininity as a person, because we are people who kind of understand what it's like to feel empathy and see and understand what it's like to grow up without certain things. So I think it's been an environment for me that has been life-changing in that sense, because I feel like I'm a part of a bigger thing, because it's more than just about generating electricity. We invest in communities around us. We invest in younger girls in those communities, and we also make a positive impact in electrifying the South Africa as a whole. There was a study or a research statistics that was released in around 2019 saying that South Africa has about 15% of people still without electricity. So knowing what we can actually do as females, as also just in the industry that you are in, to try and achieve a goal where South Africa is fully electrified and everyone has access to electricity is something that is very much close to my heart, because I was once one of those people who would use paraffin lamps, who would go to fetch firewood to get certain things done. So like being in this kind of environment, I only just hope that it actually empowers other people as well who are looking to be in a female environment that is much more technical as mine is. That it's not just about what you can do, it's also about what other people other people's lives that are going to be changed through what you do. Because we do much more than just building the projects. There is a whole lot of projects that happen within the communities that we build the projects around that inadvertently improve other people's lives in the process.
Thank you so much for your, that was really great. Maloba, it's your turn now as the male on our panel. And I think there's always this conversation around having men as allies. And this is something that has come up as well from the other panelists, just not using the word allies, but it is around the responsibility of males actually making the environments which they socialize and network also conducive and inviting for women. So I'd like to know from you as a male, are there unconscious actions that maybe you're aware of and your counterparts are not necessarily aware of that seemingly tend to exclude women? And judging from what has been said so far, what sort of recommendations and suggestions actually can you give to us in terms of putting some of these things into strategies?
All right, thanks, Tlochi, and yeah, thanks to all my fellow panelists. I'm taking tons of notes here. It's always so strange to have to share this perspective, because one has to almost step out of your own body and look at your actions, which is, I think, usually a very uncomfortable thing to do. But I'd want to first start with a statement I read, which I think is quite apt for the discussion we're having. We're talking about gender diversity, we're talking about equality. So as I was making a few notes, I came across equality and then equity. And I thought, well, what's the difference, right? And so I found this quote that says, equality means each individual is given the same resources or opportunities, right? Okay, that sounds good. Sounds like what we should be doing. While equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. And I thought, whoa, okay, that sounds like what we probably should be striving for, which is gender equity. So I think that just sort of framed my approach to this discussion, and just probably my approach going forward. And I think then for us men as allies, I think the first part would be really to recognize the various levels of nuance in terms of inclusiveness. So we've got race on one hand, you've got different backgrounds and interests, you've got different age groups. And I think all of these come into play when we talk about these clubs and these behavioral tendencies where, people are like, cool, on the golf course. I mean, personally, I don't play golf, so I'm just like, but I see it maybe on the soccer pitch or running. And it's like, there's different people who have different interests. So you can't create an environment where important work happens in a specific social preference. You sort of need to take those away completely and leave them as social spaces and keep the work in an inclusive environment. So I think, and the question was, what have I seen these unconscious actions? So I thought, let me look at the company that I work with. We're a small company, which means that we're always in each other's faces, even though it's virtual now. But because we're in each other's faces, I think we've settled to, and because we've grown quite organically as a company, to rather keep it very simple, right? So we don't have a set of programs or initiatives that try to include everyone, but rather to underpin our culture as a company on a couple of very basic things. The one for us as a business, and recognizing that it's a business and so it's a service and an income type of model, is to base it on professionalism, right? So we are a professional outfit. And so in achieving that, we're taking an interest in each other's abilities and skills. And for me, what that means is very much recognizing that the other half of the population has a unique set of skills and approaches and perspectives that a collective of men cannot have. So if you are thinking of a good business model, why would you leave out the other pool of this human capital in it, right? So taking an interest in each other's abilities and building a stronger team based on the fact that we have all of these different sets of abilities, right? And then team as well. So we're here to provide services to our clients as best as we can, as sustainably as we can, and to keep learning. And for us to do that, we need to understand, the various personalities and preferences, and then put those aside and keep focused on the work, right? So we are a team of individuals and we respect those individualities, but the core that we're here is to deliver a specific service underpinned by professionalism, right? But of course, we're humans at the same time. So we also try and create this community without mixing social aspects where it gets very difficult to include everyone socially. We do some very simple things as an entity, which is just creating spaces for each other, for ourselves to know each other. So we have weekly catch-ups, we do dinners, lunches as a group collective where people get to interact across. I always tell my wife, like, yeah, we went to, this fancy restaurant and we had this person and this person, and she'd be like, even that person was there? It's like, yes, the whole team is there. just so that we maintain a human link, but it also then underpins that ability to tap into everybody's potential. And you can only really do that when you know what that person likes, how they like to operate. And so we try and create that community very simply, very genuinely. And I put a note like to be genuine about it. So there's no, oh, we're going on a team building per se. It's we're going to have lunch. We've had a lot of work. Let's go debrief, catch up, have laughs, share memes, you know. And so for us, it's in that way of just being very genuine about it that we seek to include each other. And for us, it's gender is, of course, a very important thing, but it's also age. So we have people of varying ages, also backgrounds, you know. So we do have people who like playing tennis and would much rather do it on the tennis courts, but there's others who don't. They have different backgrounds, different universities. We can talk about, you know, you're an Aiki, you're a Taki, but not everybody is one of those things and they don't understand what you're talking about. So we just make sure that it's in a very common space in which we can find each other to get the work done. But of course, I mean, that doesn't cover the whole thing, but just reflecting on how we approach it at a company level, those are some of the things that I think are quite useful to point out.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Madlob. I think it's also links so well to the question that I have for Sue on major and deliberate actions. I think some of the things that Madlob has shared with us, you know, having team lunches, it's a very deliberate action to get everyone to sit around and actually interact on a social level. And so, Sue, the question I have for you is, what major and deliberate actions have you observed or been part of that have been driven successfully by different organizations, and you could actually also measure and see the outcome from a long-term perspective?
Yeah. Well, I'd like to say I have three adult daughters, and sometimes I get a bit depressed when I hear them talk, because they're all sort of in various stages of entering an organization and, you know, fledgling careers and so on, when it seems that things haven't changed. You know, my golly, you know, all this time we've been talking about this, and it hasn't changed. But actually, I think it has. And two things have changed. And the one is that I think things have shifted from whether you call them programs, interventions, development programs, whatever you call them, things that are done, not so much as about let's help women fit in, let's help them cope with a patriarchal system. That has shifted to actually how do we as women become change agents. And so actually that huge sense, and Toko was really talking about that as well. And unfortunately, sadly, in a way, for a lot of women, that only happens when they leave their corporate organizations and go into either smaller businesses or start their own businesses. That's a change we still need to see. But more and more women I see are actually making a difference within a larger corporate organization. So women as change agents is a massive, massive theme in my opinion. What do we need to do to enable that process or to enable that? And the second thing I think is, and again, this is I learned from my children, and it does relate to what Maloba was saying. You inspired me to say this, which is that actually I think a lot of men are changing their views dramatically. And that, so there's a different kind of a level of awareness, a different level of appreciation sounds like an incredibly patronizing word, and I don't mean it. When I say appreciation, I mean this is what you deliver, you as an individual, you as a woman, you as whatever you are. So actually, and we need that, and boy, that is important. You add incredible value. So I'm not sure I'm totally answering your question, but I think interventions to enable change agency and just agency to happen, interventions to just get the numbers up, because it is actually a numbers game. Certainly in big corporates. I mean, some of the work I do at UCT, you know, is when we actually have 200 women in different cohorts from an organization going through a program, and that starts shifting you know, a collective sense of confidence and a collective sense of agency. So yeah, I mean, I would totally agree. You know, I looked at that the UNIDO presentation. There's some good stuff there, zero tolerance for sexual harassment, the way you phrase adverts, the way you source people, you know, recruitment, all that sort of incredibly important stuff. And just like awareness and openness and listening, you know, listening to people, you know, about, you know, now having to work 24/7, always been, you know, on tap because we now work remotely. It's not that easy for everyone, you know. Are we open to hearing that? You know, are we open to hearing the feedback? So I am a fan of women development programs because I've seen how they work, but it's certainly not the only intervention, but it's a very powerful one because it provides a safe space for learning, for community, for experimentation, and for critical mass. So yeah, that's what I'd like to add into the discussion. Thank you.
Sue. Yeah, I think policy. And Togo, earlier you spoke about how you are encouraging the adoption of the objectives set by UN Women, and I mean UNIDO as well. Valerie did share a very lovely presentation with us before this webinar. And what are some of the things and your self-leadership anecdotes that you can actually share with the panel?
Thanks for that, Letohonolo. So I guess, again, touching on what I'd spoken about before, I really think for me, what's really been what's enabled me to continue being in the sector has really just being focused on, you know, I've always been so determined to turn my intersection of prejudice into an intersection of power. You know, when you then say, okay, cool, yes, you can add these titles to me, that's fine, I own it, but, you know, there's power in that prejudice, in that there's a level of resilience that I have built simply because of having had that intersection of prejudice. And that is therefore the power that, you know, and in converting that, you know, I've been able to do what I've been able to do. And I think for me, what's really worked for me has just been, you know, being different in a homogenous environment has really allowed me to bring a different perspective to the room. So for me, every day, even on the days when I'm like, yo, my goodness, am I ready for that side eye or whatever? For me, I've kind of taken it as an opportunity to say that every time, you know, I have a chance to give a voice and to bring a voice that would ordinarily not have been heard, and bring it, you know, and give it a seat at the table. So I will take the side eye, I will drive through it because those voices need to be heard. And if, you know, if one Togozile in your ear is a bit of an annoyance, wait until she's finished, where we have a boardroom full of Togoziles that are saying, well, we're here and we're kind of not going to go. We're kind of not going to go anywhere. And I think what we really need to be doing, and as much as I have my lived experience, I don't think that a lot of people, I don't think it's necessary for us to all go through the same school fees. I don't think it's necessary for, you know, the generation of female entrepreneurs that come after me to necessarily have to go through it. And I think that we really need to be intentional as a sector and as an industry in terms of how are we actually going to bring on board more women into the value chain. It's a nice idea, but what are we actually going to do about it? And I really think that, you know, we keep saying things like access to market, access to finance, that's going to really answer the question, you know, that's really going to solve for it. But the problem is the solutions, and in the way that they've been positioned, there's really a disconnect, and that there's opportunities, you know, there's policies, there's so much happening. We can't say that, you know, the private sector isn't coming to the party. We can't say that government isn't coming to the party. I mean, what's happening in a parallel conversation speaks directly to that. But I think that there's really a disconnect in terms of how do I understand this enabling environment to a level where I can convert this into a viable business, you know, and you know, so what is this energy sector about? How does it tie in with climate change? Apparently, you know, we've destroyed the planet. What does this all mean? Who are the players? You know, who are the players? What's the playing field? I think it's important that we have concerted capability building and almost that hand holding with our entrepreneurs, because I kind of feel like, you know, we're saying, oh, we can't find them. Oh, yeah, no, they're failing with compliance, they're failing in this way, but you know, what are we doing to say, okay, this is what an RFP looks like. This is how you actually respond to it. Okay, you have a gap from a technical perspective. These are the players in the field. This is who you could potentially look at partnering for, and eventually get our entrepreneurs to a level where you're actually able to be negotiating for value. Because at the end of the day, you know, we're not in business for nice times. We're really there for value creation. And I think we need to then position entrepreneurs to be able to do that. And we can only then say we've achieved gender parity when, you know, we've got real economic value in the hands of women. And that's, again, like I keep saying, it's just an intentional, ongoing exercise by all stakeholders in the sector.
Thank you for that. I think a lot of what you say also speaks to a lot of the points, and I think for me, some of them are new definitions in intersectionality, gender mainstreaming, responsiveness that Valerie spoke to as well. And I think one of the areas is that have been identified as being important is really the role of pipelining from school years. And I think over the years, the attention really has been on STEM subjects, which is your science, technology, engineering, mathematics. But I think along the value chain of our energy sector, there's a lot of other skills that are needed. Toba, I mean, you in the legal space, and we've got Vuyo, who's an engineer, and you know, we've got Sue, who's in leadership, a leadership and organizational professional. And I think with the whole value chain, again, I mean, we have social science, we have financing, and those are also important skills where we actually need to see the representation of women. So I'm opening this up to everyone on the panel. I'll just give 3 minutes for this question, but anyone who would like to take a chance at it, what strategies and you know, what awareness do you think we could still create in these other areas as well along the value chain of the renewable sector? Should I choose? Okay,
Can I come in?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I would like to say, sorry, am I hearing feedback? Can I go on? Yes. Yeah, I think socialization is a very important part of it. And I'm not just talking about school. I think our exposure, and hopefully our newer generation is being exposed more to that, you know, and the more we have role models to say women can do this too. And that is why I think the UN Women's call for advertising to be mindful of not making it look like this is for girls and this is for boys. That sort of thing is important. But if I use myself as an example, and I really, Laura's points about imposter syndrome, I've been there too, and I'm sure many women have. I am not an engineer. I started out as a social worker. I then became a teacher. I was a manager in education. I did all sorts of things in my lifetime, but I definitely wasn't an engineer. And I realized when I walked into their room of engineers, they didn't need me to be an engineer. They needed someone who could get them to work as a collective and problem solve, which is what I was trying to do. And sometimes we got to take a step back, I think, and think, what is this opportunity asking me to be or to do? And how am I qualified to do that? And of course, what was interesting for me was to find out that around me, everyone else then might as well have been an imposter, because as much as we put this emphasis that in these kind of spaces like renewable energy and the whole energy environment, we need to all be engineers. The engineers that I initially worked with were not energy efficient engineers. They actually had to all go back to school and learn to be energy efficient engineers. And lots of people suddenly had to get on the bandwagon and learn about sustainability as accountants, as lawyers, and so on. And finally, I just wanted to say, if I take a leaf out of the energy efficiency experience, what we realized is that for companies to become energy efficient, they needed people to be communicators, to help change behavior. And so anyone can play that role, to be able to to attract the tax incentives that government was offering, we needed tax consultants. And I understand now that there's a whole lot of women who've entered the field of tax consulting in the energy space. So I think there's actually, as long as we can identify what the opportunity is, in which part of the value chain those opportunities are, we then can put the names to the faces and the positions. It doesn't need to be typecast that this is a man's job. So just say what the opportunity is, then you know you need the tax person, the lawyer, the communicator, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Maloba has his hand up.
Thanks. I think, was it Toko had her hand up just before? Mind if I go, Toko?
Oh, you are the best ally. No, you can go.
Okay, cool, thanks. Just two very quick statements from me on this. And I'm saying this now as, you know, a father, which is always still such a shocking thing. You know, a few years ago, I wasn't a father. Now I'm a father to a daughter, which is, you know, quite relevant now, I think. The first is a quote that I saw from the Valerie's report, actually, which is, you know, it says there's a unique set of skills that women do bring to this sector. The way that women view the world is different. There is a value in women working in this sector. We just need to create the opportunities, which speaks to, I think, to a lot of what has been said, which is we don't all need men. We don't all need engineers. We don't all need this kind of expertise. And to the specific question around STEM, yes, science, technology, and maths, all very important for their own specific reasons, but we don't all need to be technical oriented type people, you know. So the point that I had made here was, you know, I think an important action is for those who are at the table, right? Whether that is the men at the table and even sometimes the women at the table, to simply bring in more women to the table and to let them shine, right? And to be explicit, it's not a fluffy, let them shine, but like bring them in with the expectation and confidence that they will do an amazing job, just as we would a male counterpart, right? And support them and network them and tip them in the same way, right? And speaking to the equity part, to probably go beyond, but at a start, at least put them and expect exactly the same thing as you would a male counterpart, and then let people thrive because they are there with the value that they have to bring.
Thank you. Togo, you wanted to say something as well.
Just a quick one. I think, I mean, it's been covered that it is understanding that the energy sector is broader than STEM. And also in that, not just looking at, you know, services that are directly related to the project, but the fact that there's a lot of indirect value that's created from an energy project. And, you know, with our, so I always think about our manufacturing sector and how we've got this big challenge in that we've got an oversupply of capacity from a manufacturing perspective. We've got a large number of artisans that are out of employment, that it really just creates an opportunity where, I mean, you look at an area like Mpumalanga, which essential to just transition and essential to being potentially impact from a job perspective, that it really then gives us an opportunity to think, okay, outside of this, what could we do? You know, is this not perhaps an opportunity? I mean, Mpumalanga is very strong from a manufacturing perspective. Is this not an opportunity to consider manufacturing hubs where we're able to bring in, you know, the number of unemployed youth that we currently have, to then be feeding into that value chain? So I think we need to, I guess my closing is just, you know, we need to think broadly around the sector and that it actually has a lot of indirect linkages with other industries.
Thank you. So with one of the objectives of our gender diversity working groups is to have a gender diversity charter, which we will use as an industry to measure ourselves. And that's something that we have spoken about in our preparations, and also Laura will be speaking to. But with all that's been said in the panel, I would like to pose this question to you all. What are your personal ideal goals that you think that would be relevant in this charter that we will be working on, and Laura will be speaking on it after we've heard all your feedback. Vuyo, can you please share with me what you would think is important to have in our charter?
Yeah, thank you, Kloche. I think for me, one of the most important things, and I think it was key for me joining ESCOM even at the early stages, is to focus on having women leaders in high positions, because it does more than just diversify giving you a platform where there is both a gender balance between men and women, but it also inspires the ones that are upcoming to see that there are actually women leaders out there that are doing this kind of job. And it actually kind of brings a certain level of confidence, even for the ones that are actually still starting to join the employment sector, whether it's renewables or any other sphere. I think having women leaders within leadership positions and decision-making positions is what is going to try and make the gender spectrum more diversified. So it's one of the things that I think needs to be very measured properly, and companies need to make serious commitments in terms of seeing how they can actually make these kind of changes in order to have an impact that will be visible in the long run.
Thanks, Vuyo. I think I tend to agree with you there that representation definitely is going to be an important thing to actually have. Sue, what can you share with us?
I'm not sure how do you put this in a charter, because that sounds quite formal, but to me, voice is absolutely crucial. So it's leadership, it's the voice getting into leadership, it's the voice to get others to listen, it's the voice to one is in that leadership role, just linking with what Vuyo was saying. So voice, I think, is incredibly important.
Thank you. Valerie?
I think mine would be to talk about inclusivity of women, and I'm being intentional now in talking about women. We mustn't get away from the fact that we are talking about, inclusivity there across all areas of a project, from conceptualization to implementation to final outcome, that we need to have a woman, maybe to add to Laura's point, to add that woman's voice throughout the process.
Not Laura.
Sorry, Sue. That's Sue I meant. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Laura's coming next. Yes.
Okay. So that's it, yeah.
Thank you, Valerie. Maloba?
Sure. So I think for me, it's that the charter needs to enable the flow of opportunity and support to qualifying persons in business. So just a quick example, we know now in the REI 4P, there's a 5% Black women ownership requirement. We can see a pipeline of a few thousand megawatts of procurement. We're going to need 5% of that owned by Black women. What do we do through the charter to not only say, hey, entities that qualify, here's the opportunity, but I think as Thokozile said, let's handhold those entities to qualify, do the due diligence, and be able to come to the table with project owners, financiers, sponsors on an equal footing. So they're not coming on as a ticket to be set in the corner as a compliance thing, but actually active ownership that we can, through this charter, support and get them to the table with a much better standing and leverage.
Thank you. Thokozile?
From my perspective, I would say, and I don't know if that's actually something possible, but that there really needs to be consequences for not promoting gender parity. I don't know if it's a naughty list or something like that, but it's kind of got to be that, dude, you're not coming to the party, and we are now looking at you, and you actually need to start coming to the party, because we are at the point where, gender parity is no longer a nice to have. It's actually a need to have. If we, and it goes beyond just, equality of women, but it goes to the fact that we're currently trying to solve for a massive challenge on the continent. And if we're ever going to achieve universal access to energy, we can't actually do so while we continue to underutilize women as an economic resource. So from my perspective, I really think that it now needs to get to the point where we are now saying, if you don't commit, if you don't, we're going to, there needs to be some kind of consequence to that you can't continue as business.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Thokozile. I'd actually like, Kalnisha, you have been with us the whole time. I'd really love to hear what you have to say.
I think, I mean, it's probably an unpopular opinion right now, but I also think we need to look at concepts of gender identity. And as much as we are deliberate about the inclusivity of women in positions, we need to consider the spectrum of gender that's now sort of becoming more mainstream in conversation. So non-binary individuals and queer individuals. I think, I mean, we have to acknowledge that the world was just not designed for anybody that's not a man, right? You only have to look at a queue outside a public toilet, outside the women's toilet to know that. And we really need to start addressing those sort of structural things that we've almost come to accept. I don't know how we'll include that in the charter, but I think it's something that we need to definitely start thinking about.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This concludes the panel discussion, and I thank you very much all for your contributions. I think we've got a lot of points and a lot of work to do, and I think Laura as well, she can actually vouch that there's a lot of work to be done in defining the charter that she'll be speaking to. Thank you very much. Over to you, Nivesh.
Thank you, Thogi. And thank you to the panelists for the fascinating conversation. I think really unpacking the opportunities and looking at the challenges to create this vision for women in renewable energy in South Africa for years to come. And this conversation must continue with all parties at the table. In the essence of time, ladies and gentlemen, we have one more presentation from Ms. Kalnisha Singh, representing the We Connect team. Kalnisha is a development economist with a passion for all manners of transformation and empowerment, specifically focused on inclusive industrialization and building inclusive economies in Africa. She is the founder of KD Strategies, a consultancy that builds transformation, economic development, and inclusion programs, amongst other offerings. KD Strategies joined forces with WeConnect in September 2020 to build a mentorship program specifically for women and non-binary individuals in the renewable energy space. The strategic objective of the WeConnect mentorship program is to empower women and strengthen the network so that mentors and mentees can again act as connectors to expand and grow and showcase the female talent or leaders in the renewable energy industry. WeConnect is a platform connecting women in renewable energy that has the objective of creating opportunities for women and men to network, find mentorship opportunities, and share knowledge. Kalnisha will be presenting leadership through mentorship. Over to you, Kalnisha.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to very quickly take you through some of the objectives and findings and observations through the mentorship program that we've been running since May this year. The WeConnect mentorship program was sort of launched in partnership with Sawia and Sapphire in March, with the actual mentorship pairs and the formal program starting in May after a selection process. The intention of the program was essentially to catalyze connections, right? We wanted our mentors and mentees to form authentic connections in order to, I mean, like Valerie said, get more men and women together collectively at the table. We invited both men and women and everyone in between to participate as a mentor. And we invited females and non-binary individuals to participate as mentees in a 6-month semi-structured program. Because our intention was to catalyze the organic relationships, we agreed that too much formality in the program design will inhibit the authenticity of the relationship and of the experience between the mentor and mentee. So how we got around that was by sort of doing group touchpoint sessions throughout the course of the program, to talk about key issues and challenges that were raised by the mentors and the mentees in the process. Some very, very interesting highlights for us was that we talk about allies, and it's really interesting that we had more male applicants to be mentors on the program than we did female. So currently we have 22 participants in all, 11 pairs, 6 male mentors and 5 female mentors. But generally, I mean, I think 60% of our applicants for mentor positions were male and just 40% female, which was quite surprising for us. But I'm the eternal idealist. So I think that the role of the ally to the diversity conversation is definitely going to be one that is growing and needs to be better defined. We also went through a process of pairing our mentors, male-female, creating male-female peer mentor pairs, so that we can encourage relationships at that leadership level between our mentors. And again, with the intention of having more women invited to the table. As we all know, and as history sort of tells us, the easiest way for us to break glass ceilings is to stand on them. So we're hoping that the female leaders in our group will do that, just that, and act as change agents and sort of in order to start changing the narrative. What we're also very excited about is the second phase of our mentorship program is a 3-month student mentor process, where our current mentees are going to be partnered with students and youth that are interested in entering the renewable energy space. And that program is just to encourage a wider conversation around career opportunities and the various opportunities and pathways available in the renewable energy sector. What we find very interesting is that the imposter syndrome, imposter phenomenon, as Sue mentioned, seems to be a challenge for both mentors and mentees alike. And a very interesting story that I have to share is that we have a very, very prominent, very successful male leader in the industry that's part of our program. And when he was asked to share some of his successes, he couldn't think of any. And all the rest of the participants had to help him, identify his own successes that are very, very public knowledge. So I think it's something that we all battle with. And it's interesting that in these sort of courageous conversations that people are encouraged to have in a mentorship program, we can start breaking down those barriers and those sort of walls that and our own limiting beliefs that we build. What was also interesting for us is that when we started with the design of the program, it was intended to be for women and the challenge that we face as females in the industry. We were very, very quickly met with applications from people who are non-binary or don't identify as a specific gender or are gender fluid. And it forced us to look beyond traditional concepts of gender, which again forced us to look again at our own sort of intrinsic biases and things like that. I think in some instances, mentors quickly realized that mentorship is more than just advice giving, because with the very rapidly changing, landscape in a very, very dynamic world, our past experience sometimes isn't relevant anymore in these rapidly evolving times. So it's been quite an interesting dynamic, but I think the benefit of mentorship in an industry such as the space is that the renewable energy industry is very, very new in South Africa, right? And in Africa in general. And the opportunity is now to sort of intentionally prevent structural biases from setting in the industry. And I think programs like mentorship, like the Gender Diversity Working Group in general will inhibit those structural biases from sort of solidifying at these foundational stages. So it's very, very exciting, very opportune to, enter into formal or informal mentorship programs in order to boost your networks and leadership capabilities, but also just to form authentic relationships within the sector. And what that does is that it just grows the visible talent base, right? We have to be visible in order to be acknowledged in the industry. That's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kaunisha. I see you using me as a case study in there somewhere. But thank you for that review and update. Personally, being a mentor on the program has inspired many thought-provoking conversations with my mentee and allowed me to learn and appreciate new perspectives, which was very important for me. So well done to you and well done to the WeConnect team. That's a great initiative, and I wish you guys all the strength on that. I think before we close out, there's one more slide. Laura, if I can hand over to you to talk to next step in terms of how we will engage more and the call to action that's required post this conversation.
Thanks, Nivesh. And the topic of the chart has been so beautifully introduced by the panelists and Chloe earlier. So I'm going to keep it pretty brief. But I believe that we're in a crisis at the moment in this industry. We are growing exponentially. We need to do more with less. We need to be smarter. And all of this is going to be for the country's better good. Our growth enables other industries to grow. But if we're only using 21% if only 21% of the people in our industries are women, then we're not using all of our human resources. I know some people don't like the term human resources, but as an HR manager, I think it's great. We're not using all our human resources. And if you look at Sue's pipeline, we're not using them to the best of the skills and advantage that they can bring to us. So we need to do something differently. It's a crisis. And you'll see the two words in Japanese there, or the two, they're called kanjis that make up the word crisis is danger, which is spoken about. We're in danger of not being able to meet the requirements. But there's also an opportunity. So I'd like us to think of what is that opportunity? The opportunity to throw down the gauntlet and lead the way in the energy industry. It's the opportunity to bring gender parity, maybe not just to our industry, but to other industries in South Africa. To Sue's point, talking about her children, I've got boy and girl twins, they're very young. I would like my children to think about this industry, both the boy and the girl, to say, that's somewhere where I think I could work, and not have some of the barriers in the way that Valerie spoke to earlier. So we need to do something differently. As Lao Tzu said, if you don't change direction, you may end up where you're going. So what do we need to do with this charter? Well, firstly, what is a charter? So a charter is both a statement of intent, and it also says how we're going to achieve our goals. So there's a lot of clarity around our objectives, the scope of the objectives, and how they're going to be achieved. It cannot be a tick box exercise. Nobody wins if we've got a beautifully designed piece of paper developed by some lovely consultants that some German industry supports, and it all sits, in file 13 and never gets used. So how do you make sure that people really, and the industry really participates in this? It's got to be a bottom-up process. We have to consult. We have to consult. We've talked about leadership. We have to consult with leaders in the industry to say, what are you doing? What are the challenges that you've got? How can you participate in this? And of course, it's not just asking them questions. We have to challenge a little bit too. And that's where we'll use the research that's gone before. We're not going to do this in a vacuum. So we consult with our stakeholders. We'll put something together, and we'll get somebody who does know about writing these things simply and clearly, so that it's a very easy to understand document. I'm a big believer in simple, straightforward language that everyone can understand, to draft it and say, okay, this is what we think. These are the standards we want to hold ourselves accountable to. And hopefully in getting people to participate in that process, they'll really take ownership. So while I completely agree, Toko, we need to say, well, what's the stick if you don't actually participate? What are the consequences? That probably needs to come at government level rather than sort of industry body level. Let's use the carrot. Let's get people to participate in this and make it aspirational for organizations. If you are in my field, if you're recruiting for people, you say, you know, this is the charter we hold ourselves accountable to, and this is how we believe we're going to make our organization more gender diverse and bring parity so that men, women, the organization and the industry all benefits. So we use this charter not just to state what our intentions are, but to review our progress and come back to this, you know, time and time again, say, how are we doing in terms of achieving the goals that we set ourselves? This is not a small project. It's a big project. It's one that I'm very excited for. And it's one that we're hoping to launch in March next year and get it finalized for March next year, which is coincidentally the end of my tenure as chair, but also International Women's Month. So please, if you have an interest in this, there are a lot of people on this panel who I know I'm going to be connecting with in future on this. But if you have an interest, please don't hesitate to drop me a line. You can always get through to me via Tochi or Marilise, and they'll pass on your contact details to me. Thank you, Nivesh. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Laura. Ladies and gentlemen, I think there's a lot that has been said. Truly informative, truly inspiring, truly thought-provoking, needing all of us to join the conversation, to support the conversation, and to create that effective change that we're all looking for in this industry. I'm going to attempt to summarize a few key points before closing up. So we saw the start with Valerie unpacking different perspectives and results of the UNIDO study. We also saw her talk about the need for everyone to be in the room to have this conversation together. It is really a conversation that needs to be had with everyone in the room. The challenges women face in organizations, particularly. We went on to Sue, who spoke about the diminishing aspiration and confidence of women through their career path. She also spoke about the imposter phenomenon, which is really interesting. Most of us, I think men and women, face this phenomenon of the syndrome, or whatever you want to call it. She also spoke about underlying or under the surface gender bias that is not intentional, but it's there. It's built into your daily life. And then we had Togo talking about great life, real life examples and experiences in working environments. She spoke about the poise and the posture that you are required to distinguish yourself from others. She spoke about the learnings that you need to undertake on how to deal with the different situations that you're put into, the need for intentional and meaningful change, investing in young women and making a lasting impact, women in industry being those role models to inspire others to participate in this industry or the sector. We covered all of those aspects. Maloba came in with the male perspective, the fundamental difference between gender equity and gender equality, and the need for the equity that we all need to talk about. The need for male recognition of inclusiveness. We need to assess and understand the skill sets of our teams and best use them within the structures. The importance of genuine interaction, which is so important, to find where each other are in the space that we find ourselves in. Various major deliberate actions for success that we need going forward. There was a conversation about that we must bring more women to the table, allow them access to a conversation, and allow them to participate and shine further. We must look at the opportunities across sectors for the best results of inclusivity. We also heard Kalnisha talk about the We Connect mentorship program, and there are other such programs. And then lastly, we saw Laura talk about the introduction of the renewable energy charter with flow of opportunity and the relevant support structures that are required for women to participate and to actually be successful. So with that summary, I'd like to thank the organizers, Shlongi, Marilise, and team. The speakers, thank you so much for sharing with us. You guys have done a phenomenal job today. And the participants, thank you for joining us. Everybody, enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks, Valerie.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tochi. Cheers.
Thanks, Tochi. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers, colleagues.
Bye, Nivesh, and thank you so much.